Welcome to Talk Law Radio with attorney Todd Marquardt of the Marquardt Law Firm at marquardtlawfirm.com.
Welcome back to Talk Law Radio. I'm Todd Marquardt, 9:30 a.m. The Answer. Podcasts everywhere, Facebook, YouTube, and talklawradio.com. If you're listening right now, do me a favor and go to YouTube and search for Talk Law Radio and find the Lady Justice there with the red, white, and blue colors and click the subscribe button. If I have 1,000 subscribers, that unlocks some new opportunity for me on YouTube. But this is the fourth segment. You know what that means.
And now, it's time for the Talk Law Radio Legacy Spotlight. What's your legacy? Sponsored by Marquardt Law Firm.
So today's legacy segment is about business owners and what they do for their legacy. So I wanted to ask you, are you leaving your small business to your children as an inheritance? Do you want to sell your business to your children so that they can provide you an income so you can retire? Well, imagine a husband and wife who own a real estate company. Not just a husband and wife serving as two realtors in their company, but imagine 20 or more realtors with offices in different cities. Imagine how that could be passed down to the next generation. Imagine how the children could buy the business from their parents and start working that so that they could retire. But also think about, do your children even want to work in the family business? And you can call us now at 210-308-8867 if you want to comment on that, 210-308-8867. When I had Joseph Warren on the show a while back, he mentioned that he finds in his financial planning business that a lot of his clients that want the best for their children somehow get the idea that they want the same thing for their children. And so if they own a business, they think the best thing for their children is to own a business. If they work as a civil servant for the federal government, they think working as a civil servant for the federal government is the best for their children. If they retired from the military, they think military work is the best for their children. And what we discussed was that a lot of times children want to go their own way. And so I wanted to tell you about my own experience. I did want to work in the family business. I wanted to be a doctor like my granddad and my dad. My granddad was an optometrist. My dad was an optometrist. I was supposed to be an optometrist. My granddad told me and probably told my brother and all the rest of our cousins that he would give any one of us his practice. But when he told me that, I said, "Granddad, I can't pass calculus." And he said, "That's too bad. You'd be walking into a gold mine." And so this just goes to show you that I was probably like your children, wanting to do what I was interested in and what I enjoyed rather than what was smart, reasonable, or logical. In all seriousness, I really feel like business law, estate planning, elder law, probate, guardianship, and trust administration are God's calling for me. And Martin Luther said that we, having been justified by faith, are sent by God into the world, into our vocations, to love and serve our neighbors. And so I try and use that my vocation to love and serve our neighbors. But let's talk about some small business law. Small businesses can't afford to pay big judgments like big businesses can, because the result of a big judgment against a small business would be going out of business. Big businesses do have the resources to settle out of court. And so that's why I think that planning for small businesses is so important. And so you really need to use a lawyer for that instead of going online or going to the office supply store, because you're limited by what you know. And there might be things that you don't even know that you don't know. And so that's where hiring experienced professionals can help. Not only lawyers and tax accountants, but also financial planners and business consultants too. It's also a philosophy of mine that you can reduce your liability by making better business decisions. And the way that I think that you can make better business decisions is by having a peer advisory group. I'm a member of a group. If you have questions about that, email me at host@talklawradio.com and I'll send you some additional information. So going back to the licensed professionals, I didn't talk about that enough. There's a statute in the Business Organizations Code that you have to follow if you want to have a business entity. It has to be specific for a licensed person. But there's other ways that you can help protect yourself if you're a licensed professional. One is by more complicated estate planning. There is a type of trust that we use for professionals that uses the family code definition of liability to separate the liabilities of both spouses. When I was at the seminar this past time to talk about business and estate planning, there was an attorney that talked about a woman who was in a car accident who caused damage to the other driver, and that driver took the policy limits for her auto insurance and then went after her and her assets. And what they found was that her husband was a physician, and her husband's idea of protecting their assets was to put all of their assets in the wife's name, because what he was worried about was lawsuits in his medical practice. And so what that did was it made all of his assets her assets, and all of her assets were now subject to her auto accident liability that nearly killed this other driver. And so I can tell you that he probably didn't use a lawyer to get that advice, and if he did, it was the wrong lawyer. But there is a type of trust where we can kind of divide up the assets between joint managed community property, sole managed community property, and separate property. And we use different sub-trusts for all of those. Another way of protecting yourself if you're a licensed professional is some of the business entity protection, using an irrevocable trust as part of that. You also have professional liability insurance, and you want to make sure that you know the rules of that and that it's all up to date. You want to have auto insurance that's higher than the minimum required by law, because if you bump into a Ford F-150, well, those go between $70,000 and $100,000 nowadays. And so your $30,000 policy limit is not going to be enough, and then they're going to come after you and your assets. And once you get above the policy limits, or once you increase your liability protection there, then you might also look at having an umbrella policy. And if you need a referral for getting good insurance, you can email me at host@talklawradio.com, and I'll let you know who I suggest. Okay, let's talk about small business owners now. If you have an out-of-state LLC and you move to Texas, we've seen a great migration of people moving to Texas. If you have an LLC out of state, you're not licensed to do business in Texas unless you register it as a foreign entity. and you probably need an attorney to do that. That's very important. And if you register late, there's late fees. So be aware of that. And you want to be authorized to do business in Texas, because if you're not and there's a lawsuit, then you might not be able to shield yourself from the protection, by the protection of your LLC. I want to say something about privacy before we go, because privacy and anonymity is part of asset protection. Just know that and talk to your family and your employees about it, because that could affect everybody. And one thing that is not private would be your last will and testament. After you pass away, if you file your last will and testament for probate, that's a public record. And there was an attorney that told us about a case in which the family of the decedent wanted to seal the last will and testament to protect the family's privacy, and the judge said, when wills are drafted, they are drafted with the expectation that it will be a public record. If you don't want your will and your assets to be a public record, then you probably need to do something different, like using a revocable living trust, also known as an inter vivos trust, which is Latin for during life, or just known as a revocable trust. It's both and. So you can revoke it, and it's done during your life. And if you put all of your assets in that type of a trust, then they're not subject to probate, because they're not really in your estate after you pass away. And if you have no assets in your estate, then there's no reason to file the will. If all of your assets are in the living revocable trust, then they pass without the need of administration, because the trustee has all the instructions in the trust document about what to do with those assets. Now, they still are subject to tax laws and so forth. Still have to pay your bills, but you can do so at the conference table instead of at the courthouse. Some other things that help protect your privacy are non-disclosure agreements. If you need a non-disclosure agreement, contact an attorney. There are non-disclosure agreements for employees, for social guests, for dating. And so if you want to preserve your privacy in using a document in writing that's enforceable, you need to have an attorney help you with that. And these ways will help you protect your assets, and that's all important for protecting your family. I'm Todd Marquardt. I'll talk to you later.
This has been Talk Law Radio with attorney Todd Marquardt, brought to you by the Marquardt Law Firm. You can learn more at marquardtlawfirm.com. And be sure to listen to the full Talk Law Radio show Saturday mornings at 11 on 9:30 a.m. The Answer.
Each week, attorney Todd Marquardt talks about the law. His mission with the Talk Law Radio show and podcast is to help you discover your legal issue blind spots. In the beginning, God had one law. Don't eat from the fruit of that tree. Then came the Ten Commandments. Now we have federal, state, and municipal lawmakers that won't stop creating new laws. Laws that might impact you without you knowing it. Listen to the show and drop a line on Facebook or email host@talklawradio.com and let the host know what you think of the show, the topics you want to hear, and whether you want to be a guest.